high quality of life. Just because you have Alzheimer's disease doesn't mean you're not that person anymore. You don't lose the need to connect with another human being. So, education programs, 24-hour helpline, we have information referrals, care consultation, counseling for families and persons with the disease, support groups, an online community, and safety services. So that's what we have at the association. Do we have a few minutes for questions?
We do have a few minutes. We'd love to open this up for questions from the crowd. Anybody have any questions to ask Pat? And I'll bring up a microphone to you.
It's still unclear to me how it causes death. I can certainly understand it's a byproduct of some of the behaviors, but can the deterioration of the brain also stop certain functions that are required for life?
Yes, that's exactly it. My friend Bill, whom I mentioned, he died about a year ago. When I first met him, as I said, he was probably 58 years old, a physically healthy man. He used to like to ski and canoe and hike. When he died, he was in a nursing home. And I don't think he weighed 100 pounds soaking wet. I would bring him caramel macchiatos from Starbucks, which he still loved, and he would drink those, but he was still losing weight. He was sleeping all the time. He was falling all the time. The brainstem and the cerebellum, the parts of the brain that help us with brain function and purposeful movement, are affected at the end stages of the disease. So that's exactly what happens, unfortunately.
Steve?
When people recognize somebody else's symptoms, you go check it out. Is there a certain way or an accurate way to figure out where you don't have it?
The question is, when you observe certain symptoms and you go to check it out to your doctor, is there a way that they can diagnose that? That's the question. It's a clinical diagnosis. Do I have any doctors in the house? Probably have a few. Clinical diagnosis, and basically what we're looking at is symptoms. And we're ruling out reasons a person might be having these symptoms, and then we're left with a very much PDF. And so we have a diagnosis. And so we're ruling out those reversible causes. If you have something like a stroke-related dementia, they suspect it's stroke, they might do an MRI, which would indicate on an MRI white matter in the brain. So there are tools that can be used to kind of eliminate other reasons you're having the dementia. Usually an Alzheimer's disease diagnosis sounds something like dementia, probably of the Alzheimer's type. That is most likely what we would hear from a physician.
Question back here, Pat.
You referenced that there's the early on stage, Alzheimer's. Are there different stages that people go through, and what are the typical types of things that you would see in those stages?
That's a long question. When we talk about Alzheimer's disease, there are many staging systems you can use. At the Alzheimer's Association, there's an Alzheimer's, we talk about early, middle, and late. Early stage Alzheimer's disease, you're usually functioning pretty well still. Some people are in their home or they have a caregiver at home, but you can still function pretty well. You're still taking care of your own hygiene, maybe preparing meals, forgetting things. Middle stage becomes a huge issue, mostly for the caregivers, whether it's a family or professional caregivers. The person has a lot of problems functioning. They're not able to do things so much by themselves, and safety becomes a huge issue. Generally, early stage, 2 to 4 years. Middle stage can be 4 to 8 years. And then that end stage, where it becomes much more of a physical problem, is usually the shortest, and that's 1 to 3 years.
One last question.
Are the cases of Alzheimer's increasing, the diagnosis increasing, or are we getting better at diagnosing it?
I suspect it's a little of both. We're better at diagnosing it. It used to be called hardening of the arteries or senile dementia, and we thought that that was normal. And so doctors are learning more about the disease, and so it is being diagnosed more. But one of the things with Alzheimer's disease, you have to, generally speaking, live long enough to get Alzheimer's disease. Now, unfortunately, about 10% of people with Alzheimer's are like my friend Bill, who was diagnosed under the age of 65, and we call that younger onset. Over the age of 65, we see 1 out of 8 people with Alzheimer's. Over the age of 85, 1 out of 2. So as we live longer and are dying less of heart disease or diabetes or cancer, we're winding up with more people with Alzheimer's disease. So, can I leave you with one very upbeat story?
Sure.
My friend Bill had a very, very good sense of humor. And one day I had him over to my house for dinner, and I was driving him home, and I lived in a suburban neighborhood. It was a Sunday night, no traffic, and at this time Bill was in middle stage Alzheimer's disease. And all of a sudden, a lady in a minivan with Kansas license plates stops in front of me. And I said to Bill, I go, what's the matter with her? Doesn't she know she's not in Kansas anymore? And he just looks at me, he goes, you tell him, Dorothy. So I like to tell that because I think Bill is still with us, because he just made you laugh. Thank you so much for your attention.